Hi, everyone. Dr. Adriana Popescu here with another episode of Ask Dr. A with my host, Dr. for Dr. A is Vinny. Hi, Vinny.
Hello, Dr. Adriana. How are you today? We have
I'm
some
good.
exciting news.
Yes, I am excited. The fruits of my labor are finally starting to pay off. I've been very busy during the pandemic, not just with a very full practice with a lot of people, in need of services with everything that's gone on in the last couple of years, but also the rehab that I work at has been full. Of course, lots of people are struggling right now with addiction. And in my free time, I have been working on an amazing project, a couple of projects actually, one of which I'll talk about later. I am publishing a book based on my life's work and practices that I have found super helpful for helping people change the way they see themselves. That will be coming a little later this summer. And the news I want to share with everyone today is the launch of a new trauma treatment program called Firebird Healing. So Firebird Healing is originally, it was actually conceived as an in-person outpatient type program that people could come to a few times a week for a month or 3 months or whatever. I designed a whole curriculum for it based on everything I've worked with over the last 25 years in the addiction treatment field, in my private practice. There's amazing resources and curricula that are really helpful. And I had designed this whole program, and then COVID happened. And in-person really didn't become an option at that point. So I worked on developing this as an online presence. Everything went on hold for a little bit, and then it came as more of an online presence. And we are launching on July 4th. I will actually be doing a Facebook Live where I'll go into more depth than I am today about kind of what motivated me to create this and what all I'm going to be offering. But I just wanted to give a little teaser today about this. And we are going to launch with an offering with TJ Woodward, my good friend and colleague with whom I create the conscious recovery stuff. We are offering a 3-part online workshop starting July 11th called Healing from Trauma and Addiction. So I'm super excited about that. I'm also involved in this nurses project, which you can read about on the homepage, which is firebird-healing.com. Some pages are still under construction, but there's enough there to at least get started. I've given up on the need for perfectionism and having to have everything perfect before I actually put it out in the world. So, but on the homepage, you can find another project I've been involved in. And actually, my next guest on the podcast, which will be coming out in a couple of weeks, is Dawn Cloud Alter. And she orchestrated this wonderful program for nurses who have been impacted by the trauma of doing frontline work during the pandemic. So the people who are participating in that program get up to 5 free therapy sessions with someone like myself who are experts in treating trauma. So that's really exciting. And Dawn is somebody who also shares an appreciation for holistic therapies. And so a lot of us who are on that list of therapists, and there are people all over the country, not just California, who can get involved in that. Whether you're a therapist or a healer of some sort, or you're a nurse or know of a nurse who's been impacted by the trauma of everything they've had to deal with, there's a resource there for them. So those are the 2 things to start. And then some other exciting things are percolating.
That's really amazing, Dr. Adriana. I'd like to ask you a question, like, how did you come up? Where did that Firebird image and idea came from? Like the concept of it?
Yeah. I've always loved the symbolism of the phoenix bird, right? I used to be into tarot cards, and I think about the Tower card, which is number 16, I believe. And the tower is all about how when things crumble, like sometimes your life has to crumble and everything has to fall apart. For me, that was becoming very ill 20 some years ago with Lyme disease and chronic fatigue syndrome. I felt like my whole life fell apart, my body fell apart. And my quest was to find a way to rise from the ashes and soar again, which was a long, difficult process, and very much a spiritual journey. But I was able to do that. And so that image always spoke to me. I even have a tattoo on the back of my neck that represents a phoenix bird. So that was the inspiration. There's a lot of programs, it's a commonly used in business, especially healing business, the image of the phoenix bird. And so I wanted something slightly different. So Firebird represents the same thing. Those of you that are old enough will remember there was a car named the Firebird, which was actually a really, really cool car because the whole front hood was this giant phoenix bird with wings. I would love to actually own a Firebird, a Pontiac Firebird car in like gold or something like that. I think it'd be super cool. We should pop an image of that in there, Vinny, in the comments, because it's like actually a really cool image. But that was the symbolism. I don't know the total history. I should look it up. It might be from Greek mythology, maybe Roman, but I think it comes probably from Greek mythology. And there's some story, I'm sure, that goes with it. But the idea is that you can triumph over something and soar again. And so the tagline for Firebird Healing is triumph over trauma. Because what we know is that if you have experienced things that have been extremely adverse or challenging, things you might have experienced as traumatic, you don't have to suffer with that for the rest of your life. We now have tools and techniques that are extremely effective in helping people to heal and to even grow. The newest term we're hearing in positive psychology is post-traumatic growth. When you're able to look at the things that have happened in your life, and rather than seeing them from the perspective of I'm a victim and these terrible things happened to me and I'm powerless over my life, you get to a place where you can appreciate what's right about it. Like, maybe as a result of my trauma, I was able to learn more about myself, or I was able to become stronger, or now I have something to share with others who may be struggling with the same thing, and I can give them hope, so that you can start to see the positives that can come from that experience. Because from my point of view, anything you go through can be a learning experience and can be something you gain from, and that can contribute to your life, even if at the time it seems really painful or scary or difficult. I've worked with enough people and have experienced enough traumas of my own to know that it is absolutely possible to heal from trauma and to triumph over it, like the phoenix bird rising from the ashes.
Yes, it just requires a bit of courage and renewing, recreating, and choosing all of that. That's a really amazing concept.
Yeah. And most people are afraid to go there. I mean, really, that's what's holding them back. Most people take a traumatic experience that overwhelms their ability to cope with it in the moment, and they essentially lock it in their bodies and they repress it and suppress it. And a lot of people will turn to addictive behaviors, drugs, alcohol, food, sex, whatever, work, to avoid dealing with that traumatic emotion and memory and all of that. And they think if I go there, it's going to be overwhelming and I'm not going to be able to deal with it. And we have protocols within all the different more holistic therapies that I like to use that can address that. They can address the anxiety of even going there and doing this type of work. No, it's not always easy. And yes, it requires a lot of courage, but with someone that you feel safe with, or whether it's a one-on-one or a group, with people you feel safe with, who can relate to what you've experienced, that in and of itself, creating that sense of safety, can really allow you to go there safely and to do what you need to do to process those traumas and release them. That's ultimately the goal, is to release the trauma from your body and to essentially take that emotion out of it, so the memory of the trauma can go back into your long-term memory without all of that traumatic energy attached. we know enough about the science at this point and how brains work. And, there's been a lot of interesting studies with MRIs that look at people's brains who've been traumatized, and they look at their brains before and after they do different healing modalities, and they can see a profound difference that lasts. It's a permanent change in the neural circuits. So this isn't just woo-woo stuff. There's like a huge amount of science now backing a lot of the techniques that I'm working with. And so I'm really excited to share that. And we've talked a lot about trauma. If you've been following my work at all, you know that I talk a lot about trauma, whether I'm giving I'm speaking to a group, or if I'm doing like these Facebook Lives or the podcast, Kaleidoscope of Possibilities. I've talked a lot about trauma. I've talked with other people who are experts in healing trauma. And with just this latest podcast episode that came out yesterday, What is Trauma? Heather, who works with us, interviewed me for the podcast about what is trauma. And so I think if you want to find out more, because people have, I think, a misunderstanding. They think trauma is just kind of the obvious things like being assaulted, being sexually abused, going through a natural disaster, things like that. But there's big T traumas and little t traumas, and people can experience both of them. And it really doesn't even matter what the experience is. Trauma is really defined by how you respond to it and the meaning and significance you give it. For example, Vinny, you and I could go through something very traumatic, like a fire, and have completely different points of view about it. One of us might think, oh my God, it's the most horrible thing that's ever happened, and be devastated and depressed and suicidal and whatever. And the other one could be like, yeah, it really sucked. It was really difficult, but it's starting a new chapter in my life, and I get to rebuild all over again. And maybe I realize material things don't matter to me so much. What's important is the people in my life and things like that. So very much in alignment with the idea that your point of view creates your reality. How we construe trauma and our response to it is really what determines how much it impacts us and how negatively it may impact us.
I have an experience. I went through an experience, a traumatic one, and my sister was together with me. We were coming back from a Saturday night, and it was like really late. And as soon as we got close to our house, we were like 3 blocks away from it. 3 guys approached us and went on to rob us. Like in Brazil, we differentiate like being robbed and being robbed with a gun. When someone points a gun at you, it's different words. I don't know how it is in English. But those 3 guys like robbed us, and they like tried to get my phone, and they had a gun and everything. And my sister was with me at the moment. She's younger than me, and she like hid behind me all the time. The guys only interacted with me. They didn't even look at her. They stole my phone, my wallet, and went away. And right after that, we looked for cover, called our parents and everything. And for me, that was just like one more night. Like I couldn't care less about my phone or about the money that I lost. But that experience became like so intense for my sister that she remembered that, and that she like started being a bit crazy about walking alone and like driving and like walking in the city, even like where she works. Sometimes if someone weird like went through or entered her store, she would like freak out. And that became huge for her, like for more than a year. And I I don't even remember that I was robbed, and that the guy pointed a gun at me and like decided to take the things away from me. And it took her a while to like be free of that and start to release it. While for me, I was like, okay, that's fine.
Yeah,
I don't care.
exactly. I mean, that's such a great example of that, right? You were able to deal with the trauma in the moment and in the days after, and she wasn't. It overwhelmed her system. And that's what trauma is, an experience you have that is so frightening, oftentimes with the threat of death. People had a gun, right? Something terrible could have happened. Where you're encountering something like that or witnessing someone else going through something like that, and it overwhelms your ability to cope. Yeah. And people's resilience is different. And some people have a greater ability to cope with difficult circumstances than others. So Yeah. And so there's those little t traumas, big T traumas and little t traumas, the traumas we experience every day. The loss of a pet, the loss of a relationship or a job, health issues, all kinds of things. I have a long list of ideas for workshops that I'd like to offer, because we're going to continue with online offerings for now and then move into in-person, maybe half day or full day workshops. And then ultimately what I'm looking for to create with Firebird is multi-day retreats in beautiful places around the world. I actually just spoke with a woman in Bali last night who orchestrates healing retreats in Bali. And so I really am looking at that maybe for next year, later 2023, looking at creating something like that for folks to come and really take a deep dive into whatever it is that's still impacting their lives, get some holistic healing in a beautiful place where you also get to explore other activities and things like that. That's really my vision. That's what I've wanted to create for a while. So I'm really excited. And then one day Firebird is going to have an in-person location, some sort of healing center, likely here in California, maybe somewhere else, where I can bring in the best of the best. Because for me, being a Firebird myself, to heal from the trauma of having a debilitating chronic illness that supposedly there is no cure for, that doctors didn't even know what it was for 13 years. I struggled and suffered for 13 years before I even got a correct diagnosis. With treatment that was, they didn't have much to offer me as far as treatment goes in the traditional Western paradigm. So I really looked to alternative therapies, holistic therapies, chiropractic, acupuncture, homeopathy, herbs, and then a lot of healing work. Because what people don't realize is that a lot of times, any kind of chronic health condition you're dealing with likely has a connection to your early life experiences. And what we know from the Adverse Childhood Experiences study, which we're going to have a link to on the website. It's still being worked on, but you'll be able to go there and take this questionnaire. It's a 10 question questionnaire that looks at, did you have any of these adverse experiences growing up, which could include trauma, abuse, domestic violence, neglect, somebody in the home who had addiction or mental health issues, things like that, because it impacts how your brain develops, especially when you're young and have those experiences or witness those experiences. And it's been shown to have a very strong correlation to later health problems in life, physical health problems like heart disease, lung disease, cancer, high blood pressure, all those kinds of things, as well as mental health issues, depression, anxiety, PTSD, suicidality, addiction, all of those things. They can see strong statistical correlations between the more early life adverse experiences you have, the more likely you are to have problems later in life. And so a big part of my healing process from the Lyme disease had to be looking back at my childhood and the things that I had experienced that were very painful and traumatic, that my body was still holding on to, that was impacting its ability to fight off the bacteria and viruses and all the different things that were happening that were attacking my body at that point. So if you struggle with health issues or know somebody who does, you may want to look at what might be some unresolved early life experiences that are continuing to impact them physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, which is the often overlooked part of illness of any kind, is the spiritual component. And TJ and I talk a lot about that with conscious recovery, how important it is, to address the spiritual as part of people recovering from addiction and trauma and other mental health conditions.
So Firebird will also be a place where people can learn more about trauma, treatment, resources, a blog. We'll have everything there for you guys to look at.
Yes, exactly. I really want it to be my target for Firebird is to be the premier trauma treatment program in the country, if not the world. So I got big ambitions. but yes, I want it to be like a resource. I want to, what the pieces we're working on right now for the website is all of the resources and the blog / articles, not only ones I've written, but that other people have written, because I come across really interesting stuff all the time related to trauma and whether it's the latest research, whether it's other kinds of healing modalities that have been shown to be helpful. And so we will have a lot of information on the website. I am going to launch a second podcast for Triumph Over Trauma, where I'm going to bring in the top trauma healing experts and talk about specific healing modalities for trauma. So that's exciting. That will be coming later. But yes, information, tons of information and resources for folks. Because I am a connector. I like to share information with folks. I like to get people connected to the resources that are going to help them. It doesn't need to be me or my stuff. There's a ton of stuff out there that's really, really beneficial for healing, especially from trauma.
Amazing, Adriana. And before we wrap up, I'd like to address a comment. We have a viewer saying that she recently released so much of her trauma at the age of 51. She thought she would have those flashbacks and it would be a prominent place in her life forever, but she's happy that those emotions associated with the trauma are all gone. It's an absolute amazing life-changing modality and choice.
Yeah. Oh, I love hearing that. Thank you for sharing that. Yes, that's important too. And I really do want to have a forum. Maybe it'll be the podcast. I'm not sure yet. If you guys have ideas, let me know. But I would love to have like a space, like community, more community for Firebird, where people, because it is so important to understand, because when you've experienced trauma, sometimes you can feel very cut off, isolated, alone. And sometimes you do cut off as a way to cope with what has happened to you. You may feel like people don't understand because they haven't been through it. And that only makes it worse. I think when we can hear other people's stories, especially other people's stories of triumphing over trauma, it's super important to share that, because it gives people hope. Because when you hear about, we hear this all the time with celebrities, right? You hear about somebody who became famous, but came from a horrible, very painful experiences growing up or early in life, and they were able to overcome those and become successful in the world. That is something people want to hear about. That is something that is really key in offering people hope that this stuff can change. So thank you for sharing that. And yeah, I would love to hear more stories. If you guys have stories of healing from trauma, let us know. Maybe we'll start with like just posting as a blog post. You can be anonymous. But if you want to share anything with us, maybe we'll even create, Vinny, some sort of venue for share your story with us, like on the website, and we'll create a form where people can do that. That would be wonderful. I'd love to hear about that. And whatever you want to share, like the modalities you worked with, or practitioners you may have worked with, or whatever it was that helped you to get from a place of struggle or devastation or depression or whatever to soaring like a phoenix bird.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Adriana, for the talk today. I loved hearing about Firebird and like presenting that to the world. And we're launching soon, July 4th.
Yes, July 4th. It's a very symbolic day in America. And I chose it. And I'm going to talk more about why I chose that date to start Firebird when I do the Facebook Live. So you're going to have to tune in. It'll be at 11 o'clock on July 4th. So Pacific time. So hopefully before you go out and about doing your picnicking and drinking and fireworks and whatever you're going to be doing on the 4th of July, I am going to do a Facebook Live from Firebird, because we now have social media for Firebird and we can add some of those links in. I know for sure we are on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and I don't know where else, but we'll be there too. And we'll eventually be everywhere. And you can find us there, and I'm going to go live, and also probably from my professional Dr. Adriana page as well. We'll share it there. And I'm going to talk more about what freedom means to me as a first generation American. and whose parents went through a lot of trauma to come to America and create a better life for me. I'm going to share a little bit more about my story. And again, a little more in depth about freedom from trauma, and how what I'd like to create in the world is more people becoming free of their trauma and triumphing over it.
Thank you so much, Adriana.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for tuning in.